Ask for me. This is Melinda Fosto. She lives in Dahlonega. I guess our map isn't up there anymore. Way up north. Most of you probably know where Dahlonega is. And she's the mother to Gabriella, who was one of my babies. I should have looked this all up before we started. How old was Gabby when we first started working with you?
Very young, within the first few months, maybe 2 months.
Yeah.
She was 2 months old.
And she's now 3.5. She turned 4 already?
Mm-hmm.
February, that's right.
Yeah.
She's already 4, and she's in, well, I'll let you tell her all about it. But we've got a list of questions, but we just want her to give you an idea of their adjustment and their grieving process. That's what we're talking about just before the break, okay? All right.
Good. Thank you so much for coming.
You're very
The
welcome.
first thing we would like to know is just tell us about your family, please.
Okay. In 2007, I was a single mom to an 11-year-old boy named Alex, and I met my husband. And 2 years later, in 2009, we got married. In 2010, we had a little boy named Christopher. And then in 2012, Gabby was born to us. Gabriella, we call her Gabby. So Gabby was born to us in 2012. So me and my husband and 3 children.
Tell us a little bit about Gabby's birth.
Okay. Gabby, I had a normal pregnancy, no complications at all. When Gabby was born, she was given the newborn screening test at the hospital. And I was told that she did not pass the test, but we were told that it was probably fluid in her ears as part of just the birthing process, and they would retest her the next day. So before leaving the hospital the next day, she was retested, and she again failed her hearing test. So we were referred to the health department in that county, and in 2 weeks we went back to the health department for a second screening. Again, they had told us probably 90%, there's nothing to be concerned about, and everything will be fine, don't worry at all. So we had no concerns when we went into this appointment, and the person that was doing the testing, she tested one ear on Gabby, and she didn't really give me a lot of information. The second ear she tested, and while she was testing it, I said, so what happens should she fail this hearing test as well? And she said, oh, she's already failed the first test and she's failing this one, so she's deaf. And so that was the first indication that we had been given that she had any hearing loss at all. And at that time, I didn't really know what all that meant. I didn't know if she could hear anything, if she could hear nothing. It was all a really big shock, and the way that I was told was very shocking as well. So my husband's native language is Spanish, so at that time he couldn't speak English as well as he does now, and I think maybe he didn't pick up on everything that was being said, because on the ride home I was really quiet, but then I started crying. And he kept saying, what's wrong? And I was saying, do you not understand? Gabby can't hear. And he still didn't really, I think he understood what I was saying, but he couldn't comprehend the fact that she couldn't hear. So that was kind of her birth and how we found out about her hearing loss.
And I know you've already said you and your husband, handle things right off the bat differently, but we all know men and women handle issues differently.
Right.
How does your husband deal with things differently than you do in your family?
I would definitely say so. In the stages of grief, there are 5 normal stages that people go through, and those are usually denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And I immediately saw him entering the first 2, because the denial part is he kept just saying there's got to be a mistake. This can't be true. This is not what we had planned. This isn't correct. And then anger. and just anger that this was the situation, but also anger toward me. Because he started questioning, is there something you did when you were pregnant? What if you had eaten better? What if you had exercised? And so that was a very hard thing for me as a mom, because of course I was thinking those same things in my mind already. You know, is this my fault? Is this something I did? But to have him voice those things to me was very hurtful. So we had to work a lot through that as well. For me, I really had an experience that night when I came home from the health department. And I told Maggie that after this night, I wrote down these things because I wanted to remember it. So if you'll bear with me, I'm going to read these things. And this is what I remember from that night after having been told. I remember so clearly standing in the corner of my darkened bedroom, feeling the cold wall with my forehead and my fingertips. I remember sliding slowly down, coming to rest on my knees as tears flowed down my cheeks onto my neck and my shirt. My heart was aching in pain and disbelief. From the corner of my eye, I could see the shadow of my husband standing behind me. And I remember hearing him saying, "Please stop crying." Feeling anger, I screamed back at him, "Leave me alone. This is my time to grieve." Because I knew that at that time my life was changing. And I felt like my life was almost ending and my life as Gabby's mom was beginning. I imagined all the things that we would never do. I would never hear her say, "Mommy, I love you." She would never hear me sing a lullaby to her. She would never play with her little brother. We would never go camping or on vacations. She would never get married. All the crazy things that come into your mind at that time. I remember begging God, "Please, no, don't do this to us. How could this be? Why?" I remember pleading to God to have mercy on our precious, sweet little baby Gabby. And at that time, I felt the Holy Spirit tell me, "Melinda, be still and know that I am God." Because for me and my family, we're a very spiritual family, and that's how I have handled the grieving process. From that time, from picking myself off the floor that night, there was never another time that I felt like I was in denial. I had reached acceptance after that one time. That's why I was screaming at my husband, "Give me a minute, this is my time, I have to deal with this." And once I did, that was my time, and I was in the acceptance phase already. But of course, with children, parents of children with special needs, there are other stages of grief, like fear, anxiety, and the guilt that I felt as a mom. What could I have done better? So those things still lasted, especially the fear part.
I know you talked about your dreams for Gabby that you wrote down. Are there any other dreams that you feel like have changed as she's gotten older? And what about your husband? Does he talk about what his thoughts are?
For him, I'm not sure what all dreams he had in his mind. The things that I mentioned about her getting married and us going on family vacations and all of that, in that moment, that's really what I felt. Now, of course, I realize that was very irrational. Gabby is the most typical, normal little 4-year-old girl you've ever seen, and she's so happy and joyful. So, you know, she has changed everything that I thought about how her life would be because of the way that she is.
How did your friends react to the news that your daughter had a hearing loss?
In the beginning, we really didn't tell a lot of people, I guess because I didn't know how to. I was still dealing with everything myself. And I really just wanted to make sure that we had seen the right audiologist and were given definite details about what her hearing loss entailed. So after that time, I talked to my family and friends, and of course, all of them were very supportive. I think they had empathy for us. They were in shock, they were sad, but they also had empathy and were very supportive of us during that time.
What do you think has been the hardest times for you and your family, and how did y'all cope during those moments?
I think one of the hardest parts for me was trying to manage everything that was going on in our personal lives with Gabby. And by this time, my older son was 16, and my son Christopher was 18 months old. So 16, 18 months, and Gabby, and trying to manage all of her medical appointments, because we saw urologists, cardiologists, ophthalmologists, audiologists, pediatricians. We saw a whole group of doctors, primarily to rule out any other conditions that she might have. But just all of those appointments together, she had 92 appointments from February to December of that year. So trying to work a full-time job and manage all of that at the same time was, to me, the hardest part. Just trying to find a balance, knowing that I needed to be there 100% for her, but still maintain a job and insurance and everything else. So that was definitely the hardest part.
Who or what was your biggest support during those times?
Well, I definitely feel that my husband and my older son were, we became very close at that time, managing things as a family. My immediate family, my mom and my dad and brother and his family were very supportive. And my friend Liz that's in the back, Liz works with me. She's worked with me for 12 years now. And even though we were on staff together, during that time we became friends and even family, because Liz really helped fill in that gap at work. There were days that I couldn't remember my own name, just because I was so overwhelmed with everything else, and Liz was always there to kind of balance things for me at work and fill in the gaps where I was dropping the ball on things sometimes. She was always there to pick it up. So she's become a very important part of our family, and now she's been titled Aunt Wizzy from Gabby.
What would you say to other parents about grief based on your experiences?
I think one of the important things is to know that even though you may read that there are certain stages that people go through and in a typical order, everybody grieves in a very different way. I grieve differently than my husband did. You might grieve differently than we did. So I think just to be aware of that, and to realize that even though today I may not feel angry, something may happen and tomorrow I go back to that stage again and have to work my way through it again. So you don't always get to the end and everything's okay. You can still go back and forth through those areas of grief.
And do you see yourself doing that? I mean, how is your grief different now than it was from the journal that you did at the beginning?
Sure. I think right now I have a very positive outlook on things now, and very different than it was in the beginning because of the fear that I was feeling. But I guess now I still have a little bit of anxiety, just because we set benchmarks for Gabby, and we know that we want her in 1 year to meet these goals. So I still have a little bit of anxiety just trying to help her meet those goals, and is she or isn't she? But overall, I think I'm doing really well and have a very positive outlook, and she's helped me so much. She's taught me a lot.
What tips would you give new parent advisors as they start to work with families that are just beginning their journey that you and your family have gone through?
Well, this was one of the easiest questions for me, and let me just tell you that this lady right here, and I hope I don't tear up, she changed my life. She really did. So one of the most important things I would say is just to be genuine, because when she came to me with information and knowledge and a strategy of how to help me. But she also came to me as a caring and genuine person, and I knew that from the first day I met her. So being honest and genuine with your clients and your families is so important. I think Maggie learned with me, sometimes you have to repeat things several times. Even though I'm a fairly intelligent person, there's only so much that can stick in your brain sometimes when you're overloaded. So Maggie was very patient with me and would remind me of things over and over in a way that was not insulting, in a way that was helpful to me, to help me along the way. She was never afraid to stray from her lesson plan. She would always come prepared with a lesson in hand, but she was not afraid to stop everything and go, tell me about what's going on right now. And then we would talk about that and come back to the lesson. But she was not afraid to talk to me on a personal level to meet my need at that time. And then one of the biggest things, and I've told her this just recently, she told me in the very beginning, Melinda, this is overwhelming, and I understand that. She said, my advice to you would be to get you some binders. And she said, you need, every time you go to a doctor, get their business card and keep it. Because you're going to need to remember. You think you're going to remember who the cardiologist is. I couldn't tell you his name right now, but I have a binder. So I can go back to that. So I wrote down, I kept a little log every appointment that we had. I had no idea we would reach 92 by the end of the year. That was crazy. But I started writing all those people down. And then I would carry those binders to the next ologist. And they would say, who's her, this doctor and this doctor. It was all right there. And then she said, make another binder for Gabby that has her birth certificate, that has her social security card, that has her evaluation in it, her audiology evaluation, her audiograms, everything, because whenever you go somewhere, people are going to ask you this and you've got it. They can make a copy right there instead of having to request it. You've got everything you need. I can't tell you how that was so helpful. Even at the end of the year when we were looking at some grants and additional funding, you have to know all of those things. Have they seen, how many therapy visits have they had? 1, 2, 3. You can count them all because they're right there in your list. So that was probably the thing that helped me keep sane through all of the appointments and everything that we went through. So her and Miss Sheila, they're family to us now, and we care about them still. They really changed our lives and helped us in a very critical time. You're very welcome.
Do you guys have any questions, comments?
Months old.
Was it a pediatric audiologist that you went to that told you she was deaf?
After we went to the health department, we were referred to an audiologist, a general audiologist, and they did testing, but it was inconclusive. She wasn't very compliant during the time that the testing was being done. She wiggled too much. So we went to see a pediatric audiologist at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta, and that's when we were given the official diagnosis.
So what's wrong with that? You mentioned about Sheila, so can you explain a little bit, because I think our parent advisors do not
Yeah,
know.
we
Sheila
we haven't told them
Okay,
about that.
yeah.
Okay. As I mentioned, my husband's native language is Spanish, and so even though he understood most of what was being said, it was still uncomfortable for him. He felt a little bit nervous when Maggie would come in. So Sheila started coming with Maggie, and she was able to translate anything that Maggie said, but also just communicate one-on-one with him, and it made him feel more comfortable during the sessions. He felt like he could just ask a direct question without having to go through translation to do that. So that was very helpful. And of course Maggie and Sheila, they gave us the educational handouts in English and Spanish. So we were able to read the same thing and then talk and work together on the lesson as well.
Have you met other parents of deaf children?
In our area in Dahlonega, there aren't that many children who have cochlear implants or that I have met with profound hearing loss. I think when Gabby enters the school system, we'll probably be able to meet more parents, but at this time I really have not been able to.
But you were going down to AV Center, weren't you?
Yes.
Yeah, they don't know that.
Okay, yes.
Yeah.
When Gabby was 4 months old, I believe, we started going to the Auditory Verbal Center for auditory verbal therapy there. So she has been in therapy since she was 4 months old, and at that time she was going through the process of testing hearing aids, but with profound hearing loss she couldn't hear anything, but it was building the rapport with the therapist, so that was good. And we, the therapist moved from one agency to another, and we followed the therapist since we had built that rapport with her. So she's about to go into another annual testing, so I'm really excited to see the progress that she's made in the last year with this particular therapist.
Did you ever use any visual communication or signs with her?
A little bit, we did. Especially there are times when Gabby has to take her cochlear implants off, like when she's in the bathtub or shower, or when she's swimming at night. She takes them off, so we have to be able to communicate during those times. So even though I never learned a lot of sign language, we've kind of developed our own system, and of course Maggie tried to teach me some as well. So, but we do use signing when she doesn't have the implants on.
Wow. Anybody else? Any other questions? Well, this is a typical Sky High family that has gone through a lot and has come out the other end intact.
Yeah, we're stronger for it.
Did you have a picture of her? Did you bring a picture of her?
I started to do that, but I actually didn't. I could probably find one on my phone. But
She's got that dark curly hair too, and the fun thing is that Daddy fixes her hair for her in the morning, right?
that was our agreement. I said, if we have another child and it's a girl, you're going to have to do the hair. And he said, okay. I don't know if he understood what he was getting at, but he does pigtails, he does braids. He's amazing. He's amazing.
It's fun to see. It was fun to watch the growth, in the family, and but it is the grieving process was a integral part of your start.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It seemed so overwhelming at the time. So to have someone like you to come into the home and be a support during that time, I just can't tell you how important it is. I don't know what we would have done had we not had that kind of support, honestly. It was a huge part of our success during this time.
Oh. Did you use Babies Can't Wait?
We did. We had someone from Babies Can't Wait that would come in on a weekly basis to work with Gabby as well.
Okay, I hate to say this, but we have the next process here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
And it's me.